A woman sat shivering in a bus shelter on a winter night, her face pale, her thin sleeves failing to hide the bruises on her arms. She wasn't just shaking from the cold. When a man stopped in front of her, tall, calm, 3 sleepy children at his side, his eyes caught on the marks. The kids stared too, curious and worried. He didn't interrogate her, didn't rush forward. He crouched to her level and said the one thing that made her cry, "You're safe now." But could she really believe that again? The temperature had dropped to -5 degrees Celsius by the time Jonathan Reed noticed her. He had just picked up his 3 kids from their grandmother's house and was heading home when he saw the bus shelter ahead. The last bus had already gone. The shelter stood empty except for one figure huddled on the bench, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Jonathan slowed the car. His oldest daughter, Emma, leaned forward from the back seat. "Dad, someone's still there," she said quietly. Jonathan pulled over. Through the frosted glass, he could see a woman in a thin dress, her shoulders trembling. No coat, no scarf, just bare arms marked with dark purple bruises. He turned off the engine. "Stay here," he told the kids. Emma nodded. Liam, the middle child, rubbed his eyes. Sophie, the youngest, was already asleep against the window. Jonathan stepped out into the cold. His breath fogged in the air. Snow had begun to fall again, light and silent. He approached the shelter slowly, his footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. The woman didn't look up. She sat perfectly still, staring at her hands. Her fingers were pale, almost blue at the tips. The bruises on her wrists were recent. So were the ones along her collarbone. Jonathan stopped a few feet away. He didn't want to startle her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and steady. "Are you waiting for someone?" The woman flinched. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, glassy with fear. She looked at him like he was a threat. Jonathan held up both hands, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." She didn't respond. Her gaze darted past him to the car, where 3 small faces were pressed against the windows. Jonathan glanced back. Emma waved slightly. Liam yawned. Sophie's head lolled to one side, still fast asleep. When he turned back, the woman's expression had shifted. Not trusting, but less terrified. She was looking at the kids now, not at him. "The last bus left an hour ago," Jonathan said. "It's -5 out here. If you don't have somewhere to go." He let the sentence hang. She didn't fill the silence. Jonathan crouched down so he was at her eye level. He kept his distance. "I have a warm house," he said. "A guest room. You can lock the door from the inside. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just offering you a place to get out of the cold." Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Emma's voice carried through the open car door. "Dad, is she okay?" Jonathan looked over his shoulder. "She's cold, sweetheart. Give me a minute." Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed out of the car. Jonathan stood up, about to tell her to get back inside, but Emma was already walking toward them. She stopped next to her father and looked at the woman with the kind of blunt curiosity only an 8-year-old could manage. "You can come to our house," Emma said. "My dad's really nice. He doesn't yell or anything." The woman blinked. A tear slid down her cheek. Jonathan rested a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Go back to the car, Em." Emma hesitated, then nodded and walked back. Jonathan crouched again. This time, the woman was looking at him. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "I promise." Her breath hitched. She covered her face with both hands and started to cry. Not loud, gasping sobs, but the kind of tears that came from exhaustion, from running out of options. Jonathan didn't move. He just waited. After a long moment, she lowered her hands. Her voice was barely audible. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Jonathan nodded. "Then come with us." She looked at him, then at the car, then back at him. Her whole body was shaking. Finally, she stood. Her legs were unsteady. She took one step, then another. Jonathan walked beside her, giving her space. When they reached the car, He opened the back door. Emma had already moved over to make room. The woman climbed in slowly, like she was afraid the offer might disappear if she moved too fast. Jonathan shut the door gently and got into the driver's seat. Liam turned around in his seat and stared at her. "Why are you crying?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. Emma nudged her brother. "Liam, don't be rude." Liam frowned but turned back around. Jonathan started the car. Warm air began to fill the cabin. He adjusted the heat and pulled back onto the road. No one spoke for the first few minutes. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the soft patter of snow against the windshield. Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out a small blanket she'd brought from her grandmother's house. She held it out. "Here," Emma said. "You can use this." The woman stared at the blanket like she didn't know what to do with it. Then, slowly, she took it. She wrapped it around her shoulders and looked at Emma. "Thank you," she whispered. Emma smiled. Liam yawned and leaned his head against the window. Sophie stirred in her sleep but didn't wake up. Jonathan glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman was sitting perfectly still, the blanket clutched tightly around her. Her eyes were fixed on the back of his seat, but she wasn't really looking at anything. She was somewhere else entirely. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask where she'd come from or what had happened. Those questions could wait. Right now, all that mattered was getting her somewhere warm. The drive took 20 minutes. When they pulled into the driveway, the house lights were on. Jonathan always left them on when he knew he'd be coming home late. The place looked warm and inviting, with snow piled along the walkway and smoke curling from the chimney. He turned off the engine and opened his door. "We're here," he said. Emma unbuckled Sophie and lifted her out of the car seat. Liam grabbed his backpack and yawned again. The woman climbed out slowly, still holding the blanket. Jonathan led them up the walkway and unlocked the front door. The smell of cookies drifted out. He'd baked a batch earlier that afternoon with the kids. "Welcome," Jonathan said, stepping aside so she could enter first. "It's not much, but it's warm." She stepped inside. She stood in the entryway, looking around like she'd never seen a normal house before. The walls were covered with kids' drawings. There were toys scattered across the living room floor. A reading lamp glowed in the corner next to a well-worn couch. Emma kicked off her shoes and ran upstairs with Sophie. Liam dropped his backpack by the door and headed for the kitchen. Jonathan turned to the woman. "The guest room is upstairs," he said. "It has its own lock. You can use it whenever you want. No one will bother you." She nodded slowly. She still hadn't let go of the blanket. Jonathan walked to the hall closet and pulled out a set of clean clothes. Sweatpants, a sweater, thick socks. He handed them to her. "These should fit," he said. "Bathroom's at the top of the stairs. Take your time." She took the clothes without a word. Her hands were shaking. Jonathan watched her climb the stairs, each step slow and deliberate. When she reached the top, she looked back at him once. Then she disappeared down the hall. Emma came back downstairs, Sophie now in pajamas and half awake. "Is she staying the night?" Emma asked. Jonathan nodded. "Yeah, she is." Emma smiled. "Good." She looked really sad. Liam poked his head out of the kitchen. "Can I have a cookie?" Jonathan sighed. "One, then bed." Liam grinned and grabbed a cookie from the counter. Emma carried Sophie to the couch and sat down with her, humming softly. Jonathan stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet sounds of his house. Upstairs, he heard the guest room door close, then the soft click of a lock. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. She was safe, at least for tonight, and that was enough. Claire didn't sleep that first night. She lay in the guest room with the door locked, staring at the ceiling. The bed was soft. The room smelled like lavender. Everything was clean and quiet. She should have felt safe. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus. His face, his fists, the way he smiled before he hurt her. She kept her hand on the doorknob all night, ready to run if she needed to. When morning came, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Light ones. A child's voice whispered something, then giggled. Claire sat up quickly, her heart racing. A soft knock came at the door. Excuse me?" It was Emma's voice. "My dad made breakfast. You can come down if you want, or I can bring you some." Claire looked at the door but said nothing. Emma waited a moment, then said, "Okay, I'll leave a plate outside, just in case." Footsteps retreated down the hall. Claire waited until the house went quiet again. Then she unlocked the door and opened it just enough to peek out. A plate sat on the floor. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice. She pulled the plate inside and locked the door again. The food was still warm. By the third day, Claire had learned the rhythm of the house. Jonathan worked from home most days in his office at the back of the house, though occasionally he had early morning meetings at his company downtown. The kids went to school during the day. Emma caught the bus at 7:30. Jonathan drove Liam and Sophie to their elementary school at 8. The house was quiet between 8 and 3. Claire spent most of that time in the guest room. She only came out when she was sure no one was around. She used the bathroom quickly, washed her face, and went back to her room before anyone could see her. But on the fourth day, she made a mistake. She came downstairs to get water and found Jonathan in the kitchen. He was standing at the counter, pouring coffee into a thermos. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. Claire froze. Jonathan didn't move toward her. He just nodded. "Morning," he said. Her chest constricted. She couldn't speak. Jonathan went back to pouring his coffee. He didn't ask her anything. Didn't stare at her bruises, which had started to fade from purple to yellow. He just finished what he was doing, screwed the lid onto the thermos, and picked up his laptop bag. "There's food in the fridge," he said. "Help yourself to anything." He walked past her and into his office. The door clicked shut. Claire stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. Then she filled a glass with water and went back upstairs. That afternoon, Emma came home first. She dropped her backpack by the door and ran upstairs. Claire heard her footsteps stop outside the guest room. "Are you in there?" Emma called. Claire didn't answer. Emma knocked lightly. "I made you something at school today. Can I show you?" Claire walked to the door. She opened it just a crack. Emma smiled. She held up a drawing. It was a picture of a house with 4 stick figures standing in front of it. One was labeled Dad. 3 smaller ones were labeled Emma, Liam, and Sophie. And in the corner, in careful, crooked letters, was a 4th figure labeled You. "I didn't know your name," Emma said, "so I just wrote you. Is that okay?" Claire stared at the drawing. Her vision blurred. Emma's smile faded. "Did I do something wrong?" Claire shook her head quickly. She wiped her eyes. "No," she whispered. "It's perfect." Emma's smile came back. She handed the drawing to Claire. "You can keep it." Then she ran back downstairs. Claire closed the door and sat on the bed. She looked at the drawing for a long time, at the stick figure in the corner, at the crooked letters spelling out You. She folded the paper carefully and put it on the nightstand. By the end of the first week, Claire started coming downstairs for dinner. Jonathan never pressured her. He just set an extra place at the table every night. The first time she sat down with them, Liam stared at her the entire meal. "Why do you have those marks?" he asked, pointing at her wrist. Emma kicked him under the table. "Liam, that's rude." Liam frowned. "I was just asking." Jonathan looked at Claire. "You don't have to answer that." Claire looked down at her plate. She hadn't eaten much, just picked at her food. "It's okay," she said quietly. I got hurt, but I'm okay now." Sophie, who had been coloring at the table, looked up. "Did you fall down?" Her voice caught. She nodded. "Yeah, something like that." Sophie went back to coloring. Jonathan didn't say anything. He just passed Claire the bread basket. She took a piece and broke it into small pieces on her plate. Emma watched her carefully. "Do you want hot chocolate?" Emma asked. "I can make some." Claire looked at her. Emma's eyes were bright and hopeful. "Okay," Claire said. "Thank you." Emma beamed and ran to the kitchen. Liam leaned over the table. "She puts too much marshmallow in it," he whispered. But don't tell her I said that. Claire almost smiled. Almost. That night, Claire had the nightmare again. She woke up screaming, tangled in the sheets, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could see was Marcus standing over her, his hand raised. A knock came at the door. "Are you okay?" It was Jonathan's voice. Calm. Steady. Claire pressed her hands over her mouth. She tried to stop shaking. "I'm fine," she managed to say. Jonathan didn't open the door. He didn't try to force his way in. "I'm right outside," he said. "If you need anything, just say so." Claire sat there in the dark, listening to the sound of her own breathing. After a few minutes, she heard footsteps. But they didn't walk away. They stopped. Then she heard something slide down the wall. He was sitting outside her door. Claire got out of bed and walked to the door. She pressed her hand against the wood. "You don't have to stay there," she said quietly. Jonathan's voice came through the door. "I know, but I will anyway." Claire closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Safe. The text came on the 10th day. Claire had just finished breakfast when her phone buzzed. She hadn't looked at it in days. She'd kept it off, hidden in the nightstand drawer, but she'd turned it on that morning, just for a moment. The message was from an unknown number. "You think you can hide?" Her hands started shaking. She dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. Emma, who had been sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, looked up. "Are you okay?" Claire didn't answer. She picked up the phone and stared at the screen. Another message came through. "I know where you are." Her chest felt like it might collapse. She couldn't breathe. Emma stood up and walked over. "What's wrong?" Claire shook her head. She backed away from the table. "I have to go," she said. Emma's face filled with alarm. "Go where?" Claire didn't answer. She ran upstairs and started pulling her things together, the few clothes Jonathan had given her, the drawing Emma had made. She couldn't stay. If Marcus found her here, he'd hurt them. He'd hurt the kids. She couldn't let that happen. Emma appeared in the doorway. "You're leaving." Claire shoved the clothes into a plastic bag. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold anything. "I'm sorry," Claire said. "I can't stay here. It's not safe." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But you just got here." Her throat closed up. She couldn't look at Emma. If she did, she'd break. "I'm sorry," she said again. She grabbed the bag and pushed past Emma into the hallway. She was halfway down the stairs when Jonathan stepped into the entryway. He looked at the bag in her hand, then at her face. "What happened?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "I have to go. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stayed this long." Jonathan didn't move. "Did someone contact you?" Her breath hitched. She didn't answer. Jonathan's expression hardened. Not with anger, with something else. Determination. "Let me see the phone," he said. Claire clutched it tighter. "It doesn't matter. He'll find me. He always does." Jonathan took a step forward. Slowly, carefully. "Not if I help you," he said. Claire laughed bitterly. "You can't help me. No one can." Jonathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you trust me?" Claire stared at him. She didn't know how to answer that. Jonathan didn't wait for a response. He pulled out his own phone and made a call. "David, it's Jonathan. I need a restraining order filed." "Today." He listened for a moment. "I'll explain later. Just send me the paperwork." He hung up and looked at Claire. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not until we handle this." Claire shook her head. "You don't understand. He's dangerous. He'll hurt you. He'll hurt your kids." Jonathan's voice didn't waver. "Then I'll make sure he can't." Claire felt her knees buckle. She sank onto the bottom step and buried her face in her hands. Emma came down the stairs and sat next to her. She didn't say anything. She just leaned against Claire's shoulder. Liam appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Is she leaving?" he asked. Jonathan looked up at him. No, she's staying. Liam nodded and went back to his room. Jonathan crouched in front of Claire. I'm going to protect you, he said. But you have to let me. Claire looked up at him. Her vision was blurred with tears. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Jonathan didn't hesitate. Because you deserve to be safe. Her chest ached. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someone could actually keep her safe. But every time she'd trusted someone before, she'd been wrong. Jonathan stood and held out his hand. Come on, he said. Let's go sit down and figure this out. Claire stared at his hand. Then, slowly, she took it. He pulled her to her feet. Emma wiped her eyes and smiled. See? I told you my dad was really nice. Claire almost laughed. Almost. Jonathan spent the rest of the day on the phone. He called his lawyer. He called the police. He filed the restraining order and contacted a security service to monitor the house. Claire sat in the living room, watching him work. She'd never seen anyone move so fast, so decisively. By evening, everything was in place. Jonathan sat down across from her. The restraining order will be active by tomorrow morning, he said. If he comes anywhere near you, the police will arrest him. I've also contacted a security team to increase patrols around the house. You're not going through this alone. Claire looked at him. What if it's not enough? Jonathan leaned forward. Then we'll do more. But you have to stop running. Her hands trembled. I don't know how. Jonathan's voice softened. You start by staying here, one day at a time. Claire looked around the room, at the kids' drawings on the walls, at the toys scattered on the floor, at the warmth and light that filled every corner of the house. She thought about the last 10 days, about Emma's drawing, about Liam's questions, about Sophie's quiet presence, about Jonathan's steady, unshakable calm. She thought about the way he'd never once asked her to explain, never once pushed her to talk before she was ready. And she realized something. She didn't want to leave. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay. Jonathan nodded. Good. Emma, who had been listening from the hallway, ran into the room and threw her arms around Claire. I'm so glad you're not leaving. Claire closed her eyes and held on to Emma. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could stop running. That night, Claire didn't lock her door. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. Jonathan's footsteps in the hallway, the soft murmur of him reading to Sophie. Liam's laughter from down the hall. She heard Jonathan walk past her door. His footsteps stopped. Good night, Claire, he said softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. Good night, Jonathan. The footsteps continued down the hall. Claire pulled the blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she slept through the night. 3 weeks passed without incident. Claire started coming downstairs in the mornings. She helped Emma with her homework. She listened to Liam's stories about school. She colored with Sophie at the kitchen table while Jonathan worked in his office. The bruises faded. Her hands stopped shaking. She smiled more. But the phone calls started again on a Tuesday afternoon. Claire was folding laundry in the living room when her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She let it ring. It stopped, then started again immediately. Jonathan came out of his office. Everything okay? Claire stared at the phone. It kept ringing. Jonathan walked over and looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. Don't answer it, he said. The ringing stopped. Then a text came through. You can't hide forever. Another one followed. He thinks he can protect you. He can't. Her hands started shaking. She dropped the phone on the couch. Jonathan picked it up and read the messages. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. I'm calling the police, he said. Claire shook her head. It won't help. The restraining order doesn't stop him from texting. Jonathan's voice was firm. It's harassment. It's a violation. They need to know. He made the call. Claire sat on the couch, wrapping her arms around herself. She felt cold again, like she was back in that bus shelter. When Jonathan hung up, He sat down next to her. Not too close, just close enough. They're sending someone over to take a report, he said. And the security team is increasing patrols around the house. Claire looked at him. What if that's not enough? Jonathan met her gaze. Then we'll do more. The messages didn't stop. They came at random times. Sometimes in the middle of the night. Sometimes during the day. Always from different numbers. You think you're safe there? I'm coming for you. He won't always be around. Claire stopped sleeping again. She kept her phone off, but it didn't matter. The fear was already there, crawling under her skin. Emma noticed. You look tired, Emma said one morning at breakfast. Claire tried to smile. I'm okay. Emma didn't look convinced. You can tell me if something's wrong. I'm good at keeping secrets. Her chest constricted. She reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. I know you are. Jonathan came into the kitchen and poured himself coffee. He looked at Claire. She looked away. He knew she wasn't sleeping. He'd heard her pacing in her room at night. But he didn't push. He never pushed. Marcus showed up on a Thursday evening. Jonathan was helping Sophie with a puzzle. Liam was upstairs playing. Emma was reading on the couch. Claire was in the kitchen, washing dishes. The doorbell rang. Jonathan stood up. Stay here, he told Sophie. He walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. A man stood on the porch. Tall, dark hair, expensive jacket. Jonathan didn't open the door. He pulled out his phone and opened the security camera app. The security team had already sent an alert. Visitor at front door. Matches restraining order photo. Police notified. The man was standing with his hands in his pockets, looking directly at the camera. Jonathan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Let me talk to her. Jonathan deleted the message and waited. The police were already on their way. He walked back to the living room. Claire was standing in the doorway, her face pale. Is it him? She whispered. Jonathan nodded. The police are on their way. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. Emma looked up from her book. What's happening? Jonathan's voice was calm. Emma, take your sister upstairs. Now. Emma's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. She grabbed Sophie's hand and pulled her toward the stairs. Come on, Soph. Let's go play in my room. Sophie looked confused but followed her sister. Liam appeared at the top of the stairs. Why is everyone going upstairs? Jonathan looked up at him. You too, Liam. Go to your room and close the door. Liam frowned but obeyed. Jonathan turned back to Claire. She was shaking. He's going to come in, she said. He's going to... Jonathan stepped in front of her. He's not getting in. The doors are locked. The police are coming. He has no power here. Claire shook her head. You don't understand. He doesn't care about locks. He doesn't care about the police. The doorbell rang again. Then someone knocked. Hard. Marcus's voice came through the door. Claire, I know you're in there. Come out and talk to me. Her breathing quickened. She looked like she might collapse. Jonathan took her by the shoulders. Look at me, he said. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the door. Claire, look at me. She finally met his gaze. Her eyes were wide with terror. He can't hurt you, Jonathan said. Not while I'm here. Marcus knocked again. Louder this time. Claire, don't make this difficult. Just come out. Jonathan pulled out his phone and opened the camera app again. He turned the screen so Claire could see. Marcus was still standing on the porch. He wasn't trying to break in. He was just standing there. He's not coming in, Jonathan said. He's waiting for you to come out. And you're not going to. Sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus heard them too. He looked toward the street, then back at the camera. This isn't over, he said. Then he turned and walked away. Jonathan watched him disappear down the driveway. 2 police cars pulled up seconds later. Jonathan opened the door and stepped outside. Claire stayed in the entryway, watching through the window. The officers talked to Jonathan. He showed them the security footage, the messages, the restraining order. One of the officers got back in his car and drove off in the direction Marcus had gone. When Jonathan came back inside, Claire was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. She was crying, not loud, gasping sobs, just silent tears streaming down her face. Jonathan sat down next to her. Not too close, just close enough. "He's gone," Jonathan said. "And they're going to arrest him." Claire wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He'll get out. He always gets out." Jonathan shook his head. "Not this time. He violated a restraining order. He harassed you for weeks. They have evidence. He's not walking away from this." Claire looked at him. "What if he comes back?" Jonathan's voice was steady. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." Claire closed her eyes. She felt exhausted, hollowed out. Jonathan stood and held out his hand. "Come on, let's get you something to drink." Claire looked at his hand. Then she took it. He pulled her to her feet and led her to the kitchen. He poured her a glass of water and set it on the table. Emma appeared in the doorway, Sophie and Liam behind her. "Is it safe now?" Emma asked. Jonathan nodded. "Yeah, it's safe." Emma ran over and hugged Claire. Sophie followed. Liam stood back, looking uncertain, then walked over and patted Claire's arm awkwardly. Claire looked down at the 3 kids surrounding her. Something in her chest loosened. She wasn't alone. That night, Jonathan knocked on Claire's door. "Can I come in?" he asked. Claire opened the door. She'd been sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. Jonathan stepped inside but stayed near the door. "I wanted to check on you," he said. Claire nodded. "I'm okay." Jonathan studied her face. "You don't have to be." Her voice caught. She looked down at her hands. "I keep thinking, what if you hadn't been here? What if I'd been alone?" Jonathan walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "But you weren't alone, and you're not going to be." Claire looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why do you care so much?" Jonathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I know what it's like to feel helpless. My wife. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. I couldn't do anything to stop it. I couldn't protect her." Claire's eyes widened. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Jonathan shook his head. "It's not something I talk about much. But I learned something from it. You can't control everything, but you can show up for the people who need you. You can give them a place to feel safe." Her vision blurred with tears. "I don't know how to feel safe," she said. "I've been running for so long. I don't know how to stop." Jonathan looked at her. "You stop by standing still, by letting people help you, by believing that you deserve better." Claire wiped her eyes. "Do I?" Jonathan's voice was firm. "Yes, you do." Claire looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd found her shivering in a bus shelter and brought her into his home, the man who'd asked for nothing, the man who'd stood between her and her worst fear without hesitation. "Thank you," she whispered. Jonathan stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be better." He walked to the door, then looked back. "And Claire?" She looked up. "You're not a burden. You're not a problem. You're just someone who needed help. And that's okay." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Claire lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to lock the door. She pulled the blanket over herself and closed her eyes. And she slept. The next morning, Jonathan got a call from the police. Marcus had been arrested. He was being held without bail due to the severity of the restraining order violation and the documented harassment. Jonathan told Claire over breakfast. She sat there, holding her coffee, staring at the table. "It's really over?" she asked. Jonathan nodded. "It's really over." Claire looked up at him, then at Emma, Liam, and Sophie, who were eating cereal and arguing about cartoons. She looked around the kitchen, at the drawings on the fridge, at the sunlight streaming through the windows, at the warmth and noise and life. She looked at Jonathan. "I want to stay," she said. "Not just until I figure things out. I want to stay." Jonathan smiled. "Then stay," Emma cheered. Liam grinned. Sophie clapped her hands. Claire felt something in her chest loosen, something that had been clenched tight for years. She was home. 6 months later, Claire stood in the kitchen making breakfast. Emma was setting the table. Liam was trying to steal bacon from the pan. Sophie was humming a song she'd learned at preschool. Jonathan walked in, still in his work shirt, and kissed the top of Sophie's head before pouring himself coffee. "Morning," he said to Claire. She smiled. Morning. It was a small word, a simple greeting, but it carried weight now. It meant she'd made it through another night without nightmares. It meant she'd woken up in a place where she belonged. It meant she was building a life she'd never thought possible. Claire had started working again. A part-time job at a bookstore downtown. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She'd found it herself, applied herself, interviewed herself. Jonathan had offered to help, but she'd wanted to do it on her own. And he'd understood. That was the thing about Jonathan. He always understood. The kids had stopped calling her Claire sometime around month 3. Now it was Aunt Claire, or sometimes just Claire when Sophie was being silly. Emma still drew pictures, but now they included 5 stick figures instead of 4. Liam told her about his day without prompting. Sophie climbed into her lap during movie nights. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Claire found herself standing by the window in the living room, the same kind of snow that had been falling the night Jonathan found her. She watched it drift past the streetlights. Silent and steady, Jonathan came up beside her. "You okay?" he asked. Claire nodded. "I was just thinking about that night, the bus shelter." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret getting in the car?" Claire turned to look at him. "No, that was the first good decision I'd made in years." Jonathan smiled. "I'm glad you did." Claire looked back out at the snow. "You told me I was safe that night." Jonathan nodded. "I remember." Claire's voice was soft. "I didn't believe you then." She turned to face him fully. "But I do now." Jonathan's expression softened. "Good," he said. "Because you are." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall. Emma called from upstairs that she needed help with her homework. Liam was singing loudly in the bathroom. Sophie was building a tower of blocks that would inevitably crash. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was home. Claire had learned something in the past 6 months. Safety wasn't just about locked doors and restraining orders. It wasn't just about the absence of danger. It was about being seen and not judged. It was about making mistakes and being forgiven. It was about having a voice and knowing it would be heard. It was about 3 kids who loved her without question, and a man who'd shown her what respect actually looked like. She'd been given a second chance at life, not by being rescued, but by being given the space and support to rescue herself. Jonathan hadn't saved her. He'd simply given her a safe place to land while she figured out how to save herself. And that made all the difference. As the snow continued to fall outside, Claire realized she wasn't cold anymore. She hadn't been cold in a long time. She'd found warmth not just in a house, but in the people who'd made room for her in their lives. She'd found home not in a place, but in the feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be. She was safe now. And this time, she truly believed it.